word that General Lee has pulled out of the lines and he's swinging around to our flank. And if he succeeds in pulling off this maneuver, we're going to be in deep trouble. And Grant, cleared his eyes for a moment, woke up briefly, thought about it, says, that can't be possible. He went back to sleep, never gave an order. And it wasn't possible. But Grant had to analyze it, but then his instinct said, this can't be. There have been many times in my career, in my life, when somebody has rushed in to tell me about some cataclysmic event that was about to take place or some disaster that was going to happen. And I had to be able to analyze it objectively, but also throw in that extra element of instinct. Does this make sense? Can this be? Very often not, it can't be. But these are the scary moments because it could be, and you've just made a terrible mistake.
Does that figure into another Powell principle where you say, be prepared to be lonely?
Leadership can be very lonely. I always tried to make it not lonely by having people around me, but at the end of the day, you're the one who has made the decision, and you have to stand on it. When I think of the invasion of Panama and when I think of Desert Storm, General Thurman was our commander in Panama in 1989, and General Schwarzkopf was our commander in the Gulf War in 1990-91. And they were at the top of their commands with, in case of General Thurman, 30,000 people under his command, and in case of General Schwarzkopf, 500,000. And the whole world was watching them. And they're both tough men. You know how tough Schwarzkopf is, and Thurman was just as tough. But they're alone. And so I'm sitting back in Washington as their supervisor, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and I would call them all the time. I would call Norm every morning when I got up, and it was nighttime for him, and every night before I went to bed, I would call Norm when it was morning for him, just to talk to him. It's kind of like the morning staff meeting thing I told you about, just so they have somebody for a few minutes and the loneliness of their command is removed. Because, okay, anything going on, Norm? How are you? How are the kids? Is there anybody giving you problems back here you need to deal with? And so I became, for General Schwarzkopf and General Thurman, the only person they could blow off on. Yeah. Colin, if you don't do something about those guys across the river, or if you don't do something about that, or why aren't I getting what I need? They can't really blow off to anybody else. But it is lonely, particularly for a pastor who has to keep such confidences about what might be happening in the lives of some of his parishioners. There have got to be days that it is every bit as lonely as that of a soldier in the night of a battle. And you have to find ways to deal with this loneliness. You have to find somebody to share it with, or somebody to help you with the load, or else it can become overbearing. It can become more than you can bear.
Do you think the church has an important role to play in a needy world, or do you think its day is past? Do you think it has a contribution to make?
The church should take on difficult social choices. What does the church say? What has the church said over the years about segregation and integration? Was the church in the lead of this? Some churches were, some churches were not. What should the church say about poverty? My church has just gone through a several-week period on the UN Millennium Development Goals, teaching the congregation about poverty, teaching the congregation about a lack of water and AIDS, HIV/AIDS. And so I think churches have that responsibility to bring along the young people and to educate the congregation on the issues of the day. But you can do that without becoming too partisan. It doesn't mean you should be indifferent to the political issues of the day, but be careful about becoming so politicized that you lose the balance that I think the church should have. But the church has an obligation, and the ministry of every church has an obligation to go out into the highways and byways.
Yeah, and it has a massive volunteer force that just needs to be mobilized.
It has a massive volunteer force, but it can't just do volunteer work around a successful, wealthy church. It's got to go find those who don't look like us, who don't speak like us, who are hard to deal with, who will be difficult to keep moving up in the right direction, and who take a lot of work. Those are the ones the church has to go after.
Can you tell us just about a couple of the things that you're fired up about today?
My focus has been on youth work, people say, well, what do you know about, you're not a youth counselor or anything. I said, what did I do for 35 years? I worked with young people. I brought young people into an institution and I trained them. And I took 17, 18, and 19-year-olds and I made soldiers out of them. So now I'm working with 12, 13, 14-year-olds and I want to make soldiers out of them. Not necessarily soldiers to serve in the Army, but young people who believe in themselves, who have a sense of purpose, who have discipline, who have expectations for themselves, and have a sense of shame with respect to how they behave. I have married up the kids in my church with the kids in an inner city school. McFarland School is here in Washington, D.C., and these are poor kids. And so I worked with the school and the school system. Give me a school that I can work with. And they gave me McFarland. Then I went to my pastor, and I said, Father, we're sitting here in this nice middle-class neighborhood, mostly a white congregation. And I said, we can do lots of things in McLean, but McLean doesn't really need a lot from this church, so let's do something for another group of kids. And for 9 years, these kids have been working with each other. They've gotten to know each other. They've grown up together. And I think that has been an important part of my church's mission. At the moment, I'm working with my wife, who's the chair of America's Promise, the Alliance for Youth, working on trying to give all of our young people the kind of community and family environment that we have discussed earlier. I am proud to have the City College of New York name a center after me, the Colin Powell Policy Center. And what do? We're working with the young immigrant kids of New York. 90% of the students are minority and 50% of them were born in another country. So it's just the way I was 50 years ago. The stories up at CCNY are like that over and over. Or this wonderful young man who came from Russia, couldn't speak any English. His name is Lev, and he came and he lived under a bridge in New York City. He was literally homeless. And then he was taken in by a developer who built Chelsea Pier in New York, and somebody took him under their wing. Yeah. This is what saves kids. Somebody comes along and touches the life and says, you are somebody, I see potential in you, and I'm not going to let it be wasted.
How do you wish that you'd be remembered?
The only thing I hope people will remember is that he served well, he served faithfully, and he left behind a good family. Yeah, the positions are fine, but it will all come to an end one day. And I want to go out in something of a state of grace. People say, well, what were you really all those years? I was a service man. I was a service person. I believe in service. I even ended my memoirs by saying all of us had a debt of service that we may never be able to repay. I feel an obligation to have a business and make a good living, but I have to get back. This is a part of leadership.